The art of flocking is just, I guess, like the theme for this whole summer. It was integrated into our curriculum and our programming in like a variety of different ways. But I guess like the thing that stands out the most about it was sort of like our goals for the summer and like what we wanted to get. I guess like what kind of things we wanted to instill like in the kids and like the community around us, which was mostly like creating a flock and supporting one another. So I guess like whether that translated into our curriculum by like creating butterflies that like live and move in flocks, or I don't know, we were just like looking at birds and creating them in like paper mache. I think it definitely made its way into like the things that we were doing throughout the summer. And yeah, I mean, that also kind of relates to the artists that we were focusing on, Sapphire and Crystals and Hector Duarte. I feel like Sapphire and Crystals was sort of like this collective that acted as their like own sort of flock that depended on one another in order to like survive like in the art world, and I guess for like community and like support just like overall. And that definitely showed through. I mean, just like thinking about how long they've been together for and all the achievements they've had, and just like how the way they were created was like in order to sort of like gain visibility and the same sort of access that like other artists were getting, and like that they weren't because of like racism and sexism and just like general like xenophobia and like the institution of like the art world. So yeah, and like Hector Duarte sort of really directly integrates like the flock in his imagery and like his use of the symbol of the butterfly. And so yeah, that definitely like was a very big focus, and it was something that like the kids were really excited about, and like the community was really excited about to see. I mean, the butterfly, the monarch butterfly, is something that like I think that like most people know and learn about, or at least like recognize. So it was definitely like an exciting entry point to talk about, I guess, like broader and like more heavy issues that are a part of everybody's life, like whether we do or don't notice it or talk about it. So yeah, the Art of Flocking is a free program that put on by the Chicago Park District that includes ArtSeed and YCS. ArtSeed is a mobile arts program that travels to 18 different parks across Chicago on the north, west, and south sides. And YCS is more like, I guess, like structured classroom setting that happens inside of like field houses in Chicago. I think that as a teaching artist, it was really important to meet the artists that we were talking about. I mean, going to Hector Duarte's studio and like literally seeing his paintings and sculpture in real life, I mean, I think it definitely like changed the way that I understood the work. I mean, it's so easy to see like, I guess, like visual things and sort of think that you understand them without speaking to the person who made them. But I guess just like hearing about the ideas and the processes that these individuals were like most excited about and excited about talking about was like really changed things for me. I mean, even if it was like the way that Hector like taught us how to make butterflies out of wire. I mean, like he literally had these like plastic buckets that he would like coil this like hardware store wire around, and was just like, I don't know, had like a million hot glue guns around, and it sort of like created an experience that was way more, I guess, like tangible and like easier to share. I mean, like way more accessible too. Being in the actual studio and like having the artist literally teach us his own processes, it was really like, I don't know, I guess it really like boiled things down to like a simpler sort of formula that was easy to translate like into the parks. So, I mean, I think that like he had us sort of do this like ridiculous task of like making like 50 giant butterflies. But yeah, I guess just like sort of like creating templates and explaining to us and like walking us through the process of like cutting out the paper and just like gluing things down, and like learning myself like that process along the way. It was like easier for me to explain that to other younger folks who like had to do the same thing. And I like, it was easier to understand like how that could be like an enjoyable process instead of something that you're like forcing onto someone else and like because of like you're like teaching them. But yeah. Well, both Hector Duarte and Sapphire and Crystals, or the people in Sapphire and Crystals, talked a lot about their own experiences with identity, also like I guess just like location. I mean, Hector talks a lot about migration, and I think that that's something that like going into the parks and talking to these kids, like not everybody had like direct experience with, because like a lot of the individuals that we were encountering are like from Chicago and like never really left the places that we were going to meet them. So it was nice to have this sort of um, like a multitude of different sort of like I guess stories to share, and like that was definitely reflected like in the artwork because it was so reflective of like their lives and where they've gone. So I don't know. I mean, I think that also like I think that with Hector's work, it was like really accessible in a way that like a lot of Latinx kids and like people in that community could connect to, and like those who sort of recognized some of the symbols that Hector used, like there was like the paleta car, and I guess just like images of or imagery like relating to Mexico and like the border, and they were able to sort of like draw connections from their own lives and like their families, and like that was like a really easy way to teach them because it was like so direct and like visual. um, in terms of like sapphire and crystals, I think there was like a lot of storytelling involved. I mean, people were really drawn to like Marvelly Jolly story pots and sort of like sharing the stories of their families, and also like they looked at the figures that were there and like depictions of like black women who were like representing themselves, and I think that that was really like important and empowering for them because it was sort of became this thing that they were excited about because they could like create like pots that were about like their mothers or their grandmothers and sort of like yeah tell those stories that were related to them. Yeah, I mean, coming to Chicago, I mean, I'm not from Chicago. I came here like 4 years ago and moved here. And I definitely think that, like, even though I've been here for like 4 years already, the summer was like a really different way of experiencing the city. And I was able to see like some of that segregation, like, directly in a way that I never had before. And with that, like, I think that this program is really valuable because, like, they really go or we really go out of our way to, I guess, like include these narratives of people of color and like women of color. And even though like some of the kids don't share those same identities, I think that it's important that, these artists get that sort of visibility and that these young people are sort of like seeing that as part of a curriculum that like, I don't know, I guess just like that it's included in the curriculum without necessarily like directly saying like, hey, like this is like a person of color and this is a woman. Like that was just like that was like a priority that was like, I don't know, it's like sort of essential to what the program is. And so, yeah, that just like doesn't happen a lot. And I think that moving forward, like that needs to be something that gets integrated into like any sort of curriculum. Yeah, going into the program, I was super intimidated. I think like the first part of that was because like I'm a student and I'm just like an artist and I don't really have that much experience teaching, but I wanted it. But I think that those sort of like that sort of nervousness and pressure was relieved a little bit when I was able to sort of talk to Hector Duarte and the members of Sapphire and Crystals and sort of see their work firsthand. Yeah, I mean, a big theme that runs through both of their work is migration, and in a way, like that was also really intimidating at first because like I'm not Latinx and I'm also not Black, but I do sort of have like my own narrative of diaspora within like my family, and I connect to that. I mean, I think there's a lot of like intersections with like, I don't know, other communities of color. But yeah, I mean, like the way that I was able to sort of like see this work firsthand and hear Hector Duarte in his studio talk about his own work, his paintings, the sort of ideas and themes that he was making work about, and like sort of like being able to, I don't know, experience him like teaching. It was, well, the way that I was able to like, I guess, talk to him, and he like literally taught us firsthand. So I guess it's sort of like that process sort of like made me realize that it's a lot simpler than I thought, and that I didn't need to sort of develop this like big curriculum that was going to be about like hard-hitting topics regarding like race and class and like gender, that I think is really important for people and like young people to talk and learn about. I sort of realized that it's all about like our own human experiences and how we're able to pass those on, like by teaching a skill, like by creating art together. And so, yeah, I think that interacting with the artists, like directly in person, really, yeah, it really like influenced the way that I was able to interact with um, the kids of Chicago, like in the parks. So in like a fun way and like impactful way. So in addition to the art making, I think a really huge part of the program was the sort of like social and emotional world that I think that we as teaching artists and also like the kids in the park that were participating in the program was sort of navigating together. And, you know, I mean, I think that the artwork was definitely like, I guess like it seems like a more concrete focus of what the summer is about. But at the end of the day, I think that like the relationships that I ended up building with like the kids in the park was way more impactful for me and the kids themselves. I mean, I think that there's a lot of like sharing that happens like at the table when we like set it up and put all the materials out, like not only in terms of like us supplying these like free art making materials, but also like the sort of information shared, some sort of like background history about the artwork that we're talking about. But then also like I think that there's sort of this like, I don't know, I felt very grateful that the kids were like there being generous with their time. I mean, we were like I don't know, I definitely think that it was like this equal exchange. And like I think that most of the kids that came back, like, I mean, they obviously like liked making things, but the ones that came back most consistently like got really frustrated with making and like needed that sort of like support from Abena, who's like my partner this summer, and I, to sort of like listen to their stories and listen to their feelings, and also just like, you know, feel heard and have us tell them that their artwork was like good, even if they thought that it was like terrible and wanted to rip it up. So yeah, and like throughout the summer, I definitely saw like this sort of like emotional intelligence like improve a lot. No, not necessarily like improve, but just like grow and change in different ways. One way that was really like, I don't know, I guess like it was a really obvious sign of like how close the kids grew with one another and us was just like how excited they were when we'd like pull up in our van to the park. I mean, specifically at like Langdon Park in Rogers Park, the kids would like wait outside, and there was this like whole sort of dilemma where Abena and I like kept encountering car troubles with like our van, and since it's like a mobile program, we'll like roll up and like the kids will recognize our like big blue van. But once that changed, they kept getting like super frustrated because they like didn't know, they like couldn't predict like when we were going to show up. But yeah, I mean, like they also like helped us clean up. I think the culminating event was like a really good motivation for the end of the summer when things were sort of like coming to a close. A lot of, yeah, the young people in the parks that would come regularly were like super bummed out because we were leaving soon, and like it was super sad for us too. Just like in terms of like the fact that, you know, I would like spend pretty much like every day of the week like driving this like big van around, like coming to see these like kids who like may or may not show up, who like may or may not actually want to make art, but like definitely like kind of want to hang out and like get hugs or something. But yeah, like the culminating event was like, I definitely thought of it as something that was like completely for them, and like celebrating them and like all of the sort of like work that they've done over the summer. And we tried really hard to, I guess, like emphasize that the parks that we were going to and like the people we were interacting with were also sort of like in conversation with one another like every day of the year, like not just because like Art Seed as a program is like going to these like different locations. I think that the kids were like really curious about like where we would go next and like who was there and like what they were like. And we tried to sort of like integrate that directly into our curriculum by sort of having this like postcard exchange where kids in the park, in our parks on the north side, would make postcards that represented like their neighborhood or their favorite parts, and they'd like write questions directed at other kids that are on the south and west sides, like just asking them about what their life is like. And like some of those like attempts sort of fell through, and some of them were like a little bit effective, but not as much as you'd want. But yeah, I think that like the culminating event was a really good way to sort of like talk about, I guess like you as an individual in a space that's like shared with so many other people within such a small like mile radius in the city that's so segregated, without having to like ask hard-hitting questions that are like kind of related to like a postcard but like not really, because it's like kind of too serious for like an activity that's like fun. So I guess like the culminating event was like this more concrete like shebang at the end where we were like, okay, like yeah, like we're gonna like go to the beach and there's gonna be like food and music and like we're gonna be so happy and we're gonna swim and like all the other kids from all the other parks are gonna be there and like you're gonna be able to show your art with like everyone else and like it's gonna be awesome and you're gonna be like the superstar who's like wearing this beautiful butterfly costume. And I think it was like really special, like, and the fact that I guess like we made it a priority to be able to like provide transportation so that folks who like didn't have that sort of like means of like accessibility to like a car or a vehicle to like go all the way to 35th Street Beach could get there. I think that was like really important. And like, I don't know, I mean, I know that kids in my park, like the only reason why they were able to go like was because of that, and I think they had like a really good time and like it was something they'd never experienced before, for like a multitude of reasons. So yeah. Something I'd love to see in the future, obviously, is I guess just like a longer program. I think that there was like a lot of trust that was built and like relationships that were built between, I guess like all of our teaching artists and like the kids in the city. And like right at the point where I guess like we gained that trust, like the summer ended, which is inevitable. I mean, I think that's like what makes it so special, like summer always. But yeah, it's sort of sad to like see this program that is like intentionally, I guess, like uplifting young Black and brown kids and like communities, and like, yeah, it's just like disappointing that that feels like a temporary thing. So I definitely want this program to expand, like, yeah, in terms of like size, like how many people are involved, I guess like the amount of control that we have over where we are. I think that that's like something that's really important. I definitely noticed that like I was spending time in parks where, not that like our work wasn't like appreciated, because like obviously like everybody deserves to have like free resources and like free education and like free access to art and like, I don't know, just like learning about these amazing artists like that we're focusing on this summer. But yeah, I think that like, yeah, just like size and like just like power, the power of art scene and like how much we can grow, something I definitely want to see. And maybe like, I don't know, I think that like the type of support that we provide during the summer is something that I see these kids really needing during the year. I think it's really easy to get discouraged like at school, especially if you feel like you don't have like emotional support, and that's like definitely something that I felt like I was like giving and getting like from these kids, and also this sort of like sense of work that was like enjoyable and playful. Like there was a lot of like art making and talking about our feelings and like how we process the world, and also just like playing games. So so yeah, I'm like excited for the future of the art of flocking and Artseed and Young Cultural Stewards, and can't wait to see where it goes. I think one of the most powerful parts of this summer, like pertaining to this job, was like it was just like a summer of many firsts for me. And I think that like Artseed was a sort of like means of me getting to that point. I mean, it was like the first time I've had a full-time job. It was my first time teaching. It was my first time like in a lot of parts of Chicago that I was in. And I think that like it just reminded me that like I can always just keep growing and learning, and that's like not limited to like a specific place or person or like set of resources, that like it's around me all the time. I've met like so many people who, I don't know, just like wowed me with like their interests and their dedication. Um, like my coworkers with their like in their teaching jobs and like how committed they are to sort of like just like being educators in the world, to the other teaching artists who like are artists and have like practices of their own, whether that's like sort of like related to like healing and meditation and performance, or like other sort of like studio artists who are like painting like post graduation. It sort of just like opened up the world and like opened up Chicago in like a really meaningful way that like I never really expected. I mean, I also like, I don't know, this is like one of the first programs that like are just like very intentional about being present in like marginalized communities and being like a positive presence that is like, I guess like not, yeah, is just like all about like giving and growing and like learning. Um, so yeah.